Hello. No individual has ever educated more people, including myself, about gender matters and feminism, more than the British video creator Rowland Adelagun, known to his millions of fans by his pseudonym ManWomanMyth. Men's rights activists and other anti-feminists around the world have long appreciated his immense body of high-quality videos. He was making stunning videos at a time when that took a lot more time and effort than it does today, given developments in video editing software. He was a legend in the men's rights movement many years before his sudden disappearance in 2015, at which time his YouTube channels disappeared too. The British political party Justice for Men and Boys, now led by Elizabeth Hobson, 32, has 128 of Roland's videos in a dedicated playlist on its YouTube channel. 126 of them are from his ManWomanMyth channel, the two most recent from his later Humanity Bites channel, in which he started appearing on the videos for the first time rather than being only the voice in the audio tracks. The final one was on white sprinters and female CEOs, which is included in this video. Roland's disappearance in 2015 was a complete mystery. Even the late Angry Harry, who Roland knew well and interviewed many times, didn't know what had happened to him. A few months before Roland disappeared in 2015, I visited him at his home in North London. He was about to leave his family, the marriage had long been on the rocks, and he was understandably very depressed at the possibility that he might never see his beloved children again. Like many, I had reluctantly come to the conclusion that Roland had probably died. No other possible explanations seemed to make sense. And then, one day in January 2019, I received an email from him, in which he wrote something along the lines of, "Do we know each other?" I recall my shock as vividly as if I had received the email yesterday. It soon emerged he'd had a fall from a considerable height in 2015, which left him in a wheelchair for over 3 years. He can still only walk with the greatest difficulty and has to lean on a helper. But more importantly, he suffered a major brain injury, which wiped out his memory of anything before the fall, and his short-term memory remains very poor to this day. He now lives in supported accommodation near London. He showed some interest in setting up a YouTube channel, which I discouraged, fearing he might be the target of hostile comments from feminists. But he went ahead and launched it anyway. The existence of the channel soon became known across the men's rights movement. We've long had weekly Skype video chats, and since January 2019 we've had lunch every month at a public house near his sheltered accommodation until the recent COVID-19 restrictions. But I'm pleased to say we've recently been able to have those lunches again. There's a link to Roland's new channel in the low bar. I am both pleased and relieved to report that Roland has not been the target of hostile comments, and I hope that continues indefinitely. He really appreciates the exchanges he has with supporters in the comments stream. I would urge you to go to his website and post some comments. I know it would mean a lot to him. He derives a lot of comfort from knowing that his work was so influential to so many in the men's rights movement over so many years. I now have a few words for Roland. Roland, I look forward to you watching this video. Thank you for your outstanding contribution over many years to the struggle for the human rights of men and boys. You were a legend before your fall, and you will always be a legend. On behalf of the men's rights movement, I salute you, my friend.
I was thinking about a problem with the use of the term female supremacy. Feminism is the pursuit of female supremacy, but it's a concept many people struggle with because it sounds extreme. Supremacy sounds grand and powerful, striking and dominant, clearly unjust and oppressive when prepended by any group. A bit like this.
It had become, in short, an England completely dominated by the female sex. Even the Union Jack had now become the Union Jill, a sad travesty of its former self.
But of course it's not really like that. So what is meant by female supremacy? How does it describe the ardent desires of feminists and the more ordinary desires of women? Female supremacy is not always obvious, like bias towards women in the family court, or exemption from selective service, or unfair allocation of healthcare resources, etc. rather than a clenched fist, it's more often like a concealed gun in the room. It's not in your face, but rather hidden in plain view. Female supremacy is soft and suffocating. It's about women being favoured and handed advantage or victory over men on every occasion possible. Women must win and be seen to win. Men, of course, enable and promote this behaviour by offering no resistance to the demands of women and the state. So what does female supremacy look like? The principal issue with Donglegate is that it was a convention under a code of conduct written by feminists. Therefore, each and every woman in attendance was essentially the equivalent of a card-carrying feminist. Like this.
If you would shut the fuck up for the 50th millionth time! I'm reading, fuckface!
The code of conduct was wrapped around every female at the convention in a way that perhaps Batfink could explain best.
My wings are like a shield of steel.
Every interaction between men and women under a feminist written code of conduct is subject to the ludicrous feminist ideas of man as oppressor and woman as victim.
Which reinforces rape culture, which is part of patriarchy.
So from the moment Pycon adopted the feminist policy, the convention became a mini patriarchy, with women suffering for being women at all times. So naturally, any offence taken by a woman could only be justified and must be punished. The men's joke in this case was not worthy of reprimand, and any sensible person knows it.
Can I use a dongle with this? Does it make you uncomfortable when I use the word dongle?
Her complaint shouldn't have been entertained, but it was because it was a feminist view of the men's private interaction, which allows nothing to pass between men that any woman anywhere might take offence to, at any time, for any reason, even if that interaction was not sufficiently offensive in itself to upset anybody except the excessively sensitive. The joke was clearly not the issue. It was a woman feeling offended which was the issue. The men could have been making a joke about, I don't know, firing a squirrel from a catapult, or being mean to orphans, or whatever. The Pycon staff would have responded in the same way. The enforcement of a feminist policy simply equates to woman offended equals man at fault, who is probably a sexist, misogynist arse clown who attacks the rights of women everywhere. And he's a bastard. And then some. Any man who attends a Python conference or any other tech conference is now under the thumb of feminism and the toxicity of feminist thought. Any woman a man sits next to is empowered in that very unhealthy way we've all come to understand. It's unlikely, but she can do it if she likes. The code of conduct targeting men is primed and ready for her use, and if you're in her blast radius and you're male, you will pay the price. This is female supremacy. So you didn't get the job, huh?
We need to make further progress on fairness, and that's why we will legislate to give more scope for employers, if they want to increase the number of women or black or Asian employees, to take positive action.
Legally sanctioned and encouraged discrimination against men in hiring practices means that if you go up against a woman who is equally qualified, she gets the job and you don't. Every time. Why? Because she says she's oppressed, and we all submit to her victim status. Every time. That is female supremacy. In the UK, what used to be called the Boy Scouts organisation is required to admit girls. Why? Because women demanded it, saying that it's discrimination to restrict membership to boys. However, in contrast, the Girl Guides refuses to admit boys. Why? Because those same women, fully aware of their hypocrisy and vile disregard for the welfare of boys, say that girls require a safe space for themselves away from boys. This is female supremacy. Tickets to the Wimbledon men's final cost £3,250. The women's final costs £965. Yet prize money for both sexes is equal. The people who pay those kinds of prices to watch the best players, why are they prepared to pay over 3 times more for men's tennis than they do for women's tennis? To put it another way, if women's tennis is worth equal prize money, why is it not worth an equal ticket price? Add to this that men are required to play much more tennis than women, with men playing the best of 5 sets and women playing only the best of 3, and that men play tennis at a much higher standard than women, and that the requirement for men to play more tennis means that most male players have no time left to play in the other events like the doubles, meaning that women are able to earn much more than men at events. With all this, what you end up with is very clear, multifaceted discrimination against men in professional tennis. Yet, we pay women equal prize money because of the usual pattern of women complaining and men attending to that complaint. Women complained that it was discrimination against women to pay men more for their greater ability, their greater number of sets played, and their greater audience appeal. And men agreed. When we so clearly discriminate against men, yet women still complain about discrimination against women and unjustly succeed in their complaint, that is female supremacy. A woman costs a man 10 years of his life due to a false rape accusation. She's not prosecuted nor required to give back the money she was awarded for the rape that never happened. The media has not so much as a harsh word for her and only ponders the question of, should she be prosecuted? You couldn't make it up, but this is female supremacy.
The girls go to college and the boys go to jail.
Women significantly outnumber men in universities and have for many years. Yet universities still provide no unique men's resources, no men's offices, no men's departments, no men's advice centres. Women, however, are oversupplied with services aimed to help them somehow overcome their numerical superiority on campus. Where female advantage is honoured and male disadvantage is ignored, that is female supremacy. Where female circumcision of all kinds is outlawed and regarded as barbaric, yet male circumcision is a protected right, that is female supremacy. Where urinals in a men's bathroom are removed due to the sensibilities of one woman who would never even see them. Where men are dictated to by women, even in how they take a piss. And when men comply, that is female supremacy. It's already public government policy to not sentence women as severely as men for a given crime. But when we actually contemplate closing women's prisons, and I predict this will be instituted in the UK within 5 years, with the reasoning that when a woman commits a crime, it's somehow less criminal than when a man commits that same crime. And at the same time we wax lyrical about how women are at least equal to and typically superior to men in all fields imaginable, including morally superior, that is female supremacy.
The book has 4 main messages for men. The first is, help women sit at the table, help women reach for opportunities.
Despite all of the progress women have made, we are nowhere close to having our share of the leadership roles.
Where a woman can be at the top in industry, yet still behave as if she were at the bottom and ask for more for herself, or at least for her sisters, that is female supremacy.
And in order to allow progress on women's representation in the House to continue, we'll extend the permission for all women shortlists for parliamentary selection until 2030.
Where we potentially encourage the advancement of substandard people into our government, and where we also deny the advancement of better candidates under the mantra that it's to our benefit when women advance without merit, that is female supremacy. When men walk a mile in her shoes while she watches him do it, yet it wouldn't occur to her or to him for her to walk so much as a single step in his, that is female supremacy. When legislation is drafted for the benefit of women and to the exclusion of men, where women are catered to exclusively in our governments and men ignored, where one woman behind one desk can throw the basic human rights of male students and only male students into the dustbin, and where all proposed legislation is scrutinised for any negative effects on women before being signed into law, but no such care is taken for its negative effects on men, that is female supremacy. Endless tough women on our screens, juxtaposed with helpless women.
Now you come on now, or you gonna regret it later.
So she can show up with fresh bruises later in.
And never a missed opportunity for bad men to be taught the error of their ways towards women by one of a few good men. The good man will beat the bad man and stand up for women. Every major show or film will feature domestic violence by a man, or a deadbeat dad, or both. So it is written in Hollywood, so it shall be shown on our screens. That is female supremacy. When women sexually abuse young boys and it's called an affair, and when they sexually abuse girls with objects, well, then it becomes merely a lesbian affair.
Women tend to use objects, broom handles, bottles. One woman said that she was sexually abused by rose stems with the thorns still on, being stuck up. Women can be quite cruel using objects, but they're still after their own sexual gratification.
And yet we still only choose to move men away from children on aircraft because women are the kinder, gentler, safer sex. Then that, most assuredly, is female supremacy. So we can see that we don't need to look forward to or dread the future of female supremacy, because that future is already here. Feminism pursues female supremacy with single-minded determination. It relies on a relatively small number of hateful leaders and a huge number of useful and willful idiots. It is implacable and relentless. No advance made by women is enough. No advantage given to women is enough. Men cannot capitulate enough. Women simply demand more and more and more, indefinitely, with no end point, forever.
You're fucking scum. You are fucking scum. Fucking rape apologist, incest supporting, woman hating, fucking scum.
Is there someone else I can wait if you want to follow me?
Fucking scum. Yeah, it's just another...
I just want to listen to someone else's opinion. I'm not even on a side here. I just listen to as many people as I can.
You know what, though? Why would you pay money to fucking support a fucking rape apologist if you weren't fucking one?
I never heard him say anything that was...
Well, it's... fucking scum!
Ask yourself honestly, is this the behaviour of a woman oppressed or a woman oppressor? Do we need more women in the boardroom, the same way we need more white sprinters in the 100 metres? We're told incessantly in the media, by government, by think tanks, by experts, by supremacist women's groups, that we need more women in boardrooms. We need more women in computing, more women in engineering, more women in politics, more women in leadership roles, more women CEOs, and even, apparently, and with no small amount of irony, we need more women in the kitchen. The logic to all this goes as follows. Women are half the population. Business leaders, computer scientists, engineers, top chefs, etc. are less than 50% women. Therefore, women are being discriminated against, and something must be done to redress the imbalance. And that really is the extent of the logic being employed by women's groups such as the Fawcett Society. Women's choices are ignored. Men's merit is ignored. The numbers add up to oppression as far as they're concerned. So let's apply this feminine logic to another area where men predominate, the prison population. Women are half the population. Prisoners are less than 50% women. Therefore, women are not being fairly represented. They're being discriminated against, and something must be done to redress the imbalance. Can you see the problem that the Fawcett Society ignores? There are not more men in prison than women, simply because they're men. There are more men in prison than women, because men commit more of the crimes that are punishable by prison sentences than women. In other words, criminal men make themselves more eligible for prison than women, in the same way that talented and hard-working men make themselves more eligible for the boardroom than women. It's because of the choices they make and the things that they do. Be it good, be it bad, or be it ugly, men choose it more than women, and so men get it more than women. It's not rocket science. Why do men commit a higher proportion of more serious crimes than women? It's because of men's nature and men's nurture. Why do men succeed more as entrepreneurs and business leaders, politicians, engineers, and computer scientists? It's because of men's nature and men's nurture.
For a great many years, women with the experience, ability, and preparedness to work hard have made it to the board. I mean, they've already been favoured over men. The idea that they're being kept down by men is quite absurd.
Now, what if women's groups, such as the Fawcett Society, were to campaign for a quota for women in prison, the same way they insist on a quota for women in boardrooms? After all, if the women aren't there in prison in the same numbers as men, well, there must be discrimination, right? And it would make sense for the Fawcett Society to support such a campaign. It's no more intellectually backward than any of their other campaigns where they want to have more representation for women everywhere. But they actually campaign for the opposite, for alternative punishments for women than prison. Prison is apparently wrong for women, and they shouldn't be there. But of course the boardroom is right. Female supremacy doesn't get any clearer than this, and we need to understand that this is what women's groups are about.
So you're saying the glass ceiling expression, do you think that that's falling out of favour and to be replaced with a pipeline?
It is, and I think the reason the glass ceiling has fallen out of favour is that feminists increasingly realised that if they were to make progress with getting more women into the boardroom, they had to make themselves more acceptable to the existing men on those boards. Now, the problem they faced was that those men on the boards knew damn well that there was no glass ceiling. So they had to come up with a new argument, and the argument they've invented, as they always do, is that there are a whole host of issues that keep women from the boardroom. So they'll talk, for example, about women's need for role models. And you have to ask yourself, if these are dynamic leaders, these women, why do they need role models? And where will the role models come from exactly? It is just crazy.
If it makes sense for women's groups to demand that there should be more female engineers or more women in computing, or 40% of company boards should be women, simply because they decide it should be so. If it makes sense to ignore the hard work, the time served and the merit which puts men predominantly in those positions. If this is sensible, maybe we should make arbitrary demands elsewhere. Maybe we should demand 40% representation for white men in the Olympic 100-metre final, simply because some group decides it should be so. There have been no white men in the Olympic 100-metre final for the last 30 years. Every Olympic sees 8 black men lining up to race for gold. And not just any black men, but typically black men of Caribbean origin. So how can that be right? How can the premier athletic event in the world have no white men in it? Or Chinese men? Or Indian men? The two most populous nations on earth, with no sprinters in the Olympic final? There must be discrimination going on. It's the only possible explanation. Blacks have been preferred for success in 100 metres, simply because they're black. The all-black starting lineup is clearly a problem to be fixed. So we've decided that there need to be more white men in the 100-metre final. How do we go about it? Well, for a start, we could say that there's obviously a glass ceiling for white sprinters. Black sprinters are making white sprinters slow, somehow, in some way. Maybe that voodoo blacks are into or something. Sprinting is an all-black club, and it's freezing white sprinters out. We need to spend more money, we need to advertise, we need to legislate, and help white sprinters to realise that speed is all in the mind, and if they could just fight through the prejudice, they too could be Usain Bolt. We could say that simply having some whites in the final would make the event better somehow, better groomed, more colourful, it would smell better, definitely be less aggressive. Whites would bring a special kind of running to the event, a smarter, more efficient style of running, unique to whites, that would be more popular with spectators, rather than all these blacks who all look alike and run alike and eat too much fried chicken. If it's too much testosterone in the boardroom, maybe it's too much melanin in the 100 metres. If the future of computing is too important to be left to men, then surely the future of the 100 metres is too important to be left to blacks. We can believe all that, right? That the only reason that white sprinters aren't in the Olympic final is because blacks want to keep them out of it. It's not that these certain few black athletes run the 100 metres in the fastest time, and so they deserve to make it into the final. No, it's because white sprinters are oppressed. That makes sense, right? The 100 metres is not an event about colour. It's an event about speed. It's not an event for black men. It's an event for fast men. And if those few particularly fast men are typically Caribbean black, so be it. Any white athlete considering a career in 100 metres looks at the times he needs to run in order to compete. He doesn't look at the colour or race or country of his fellow competitors. That's not relevant to his decision. He looks at the qualifying times that are run, and he compares those times to his own. If he can run fast enough, he can compete. If he can't, he chooses another event. And funnily enough, that's the same process that any black sprinter goes through. If some group insisted that at least 3 of the finalists had to be white, how would we make that happen? Well, it's not rocket science. We'd have to take 3 faster athletes off and put 3 slower ones in their place. So the only way to make an arbitrary quota like that work would be to hurt the 100 metres, to hurt 3 worthy athletes, and to make a mockery of 3 white men who know they have no business being in that final. Everybody loses, yet this sort of action is what women say they want for our boardrooms. Apparently Britain needs more engineers, and those engineers should be female. If Britain needs more engineers, and those people coming forward are mostly men, then we should be grateful for that, and we should cultivate that. Not blame those men for their ability, or criticise them for a problem that doesn't exist. If we want more engineers, we need to encourage those of engineering aptitude. If those happen to be boys mainly, and they are boys mainly, then so be it. White men and Caribbean black men are different. Men and women are different. Women don't generally choose careers in engineering, the same way that white athletes don't generally choose to run the 100 meters. It's because they can't do it as well as the competition. It's not discrimination on any basis other than ability. Many people, too many people, like to believe that the differences between men and women stop as if by magic at the brainstem, as if our bodies are entirely different, but our brains are entirely the same. They're certainly not the same, as copious amounts of data make plain.
Certainly, first of all, the way that the right and left hemispheres connect up with men and women is strikingly different. The principal difference, though, and this is an astonishing finding, there are orders of magnitude differences between IQ-related grey and white matter. The white matter is that's basically from the myelin sheaths on nerves. These are long nerve connections. So it's a connective tissue between different nerve centres. We know that there's something like a tenfold difference in favour of females in that sort of brain tissue in brains. Conversely, in terms of the grey matter, which are actually the nerve cells themselves, so it's tissue mainly composed of nerve bodies, we know there's roughly an order of magnitude, tenfold difference in favour of males. So that would suggest very strongly that the converging evidence we've got that suggests that women tend to use different parts of the brain and sort of coordinate strongly, whereas men tend to be very good at focus and the actual processing. They've got very similar cognitive abilities overall, but their style of cognition, the way that they process and coordinate within their brain to approach solving a particular problem seems to be in many cases very, very different.
So men have different brains to women. We have different outlook, different mentality, different aspirations. And in terms of our place in the world, we have a fire under our asses that most women fail to appreciate.
See, we women don't have to make ourselves up. Because of our biology, we create life. We bring life into this earth. And if we do nothing else with our lives, that is the most valuable thing we can do as far as I'm concerned. Men, from very young, have to make themselves up. They have to make themselves into something. They can't just do nothing. It just doesn't happen for them. So I think in a way, biologically, women are very much more advantaged than men. And I don't think anybody ever thinks like that. And so when you say to a little boy, what are you going to be? He's got to be, an airline pilot or an astronaut or in the Navy or boxer or something. You ask a little girl, an awful lot of little girls will very happily say, I'm going to have children and be married. Even now, little girls will say that. Even now, I mean, for all the brainwashing that's gone on, what are little girls playing with? Barbie dolls and kitchens and, my children, my grandchildren, they do that.
Would we produce more sprinters of world-class ability if we had a quota for white sprinters? And would we genuinely expect that, however long it took, at the end of the process of favouring white sprinters, do you really think that we would have even numbers of black and white sprinters all running at around about the same speed? The fastest sprinters rise to the top by themselves, not by quota. And so do the best people to run our companies, and the best people to be engineers, and the best people to do X, Y, and Z. Let's listen to what female supremacy sounds like. We must have more whites in 100 meters. Why? The 100 meters will be run better with a fairer balance of whites and blacks, avoiding ghetto culture and low intellect. Are you saying that there's a problem with the 100 meters as it is today? Yes, there are too many blacks in it. Oh no, you didn't. What's the problem with that? They proved themselves the fastest against the clock. That's not it at all. They're only there because of the all-black club. It's not easy being a white athlete amongst all those blacks. Moreover, there's a growing body of evidence, largely drawn from spectators, that having more white sprinters makes a positive difference to the quality of sprinting. Really? Like what? You know what I mean, you know how blacks are. They're too impulsive, too many false starts. Plus you have drug taking and criminality. That would reduce if you had more white sprinters. So is the 100 meters as it is unfair to white athletes? Of course it is. Why else are there no white sprinters in the 100 meter final? Well, because they don't run fast enough against the clock. That's bullshit. White sprinters are capable of running every bit as fast as black sprinters. Then why don't they? Well, there's a pipeline problem. We're not getting to these white athletes early enough and encouraging them to run faster. They've been subject to systematic discrimination, so they don't believe in themselves, and this holds back their speed. We need special programs and funding to target white children early. Then we'd have more white men in the sport, and we could finally clear the starting lineup of all these blacks. It's better for everybody, and it will enhance white power. But any white athlete can do well in 100 meters if you can run fast enough. Yes, but whites see all those blacks and are discouraged from even trying. And there's racism. What's the solution to these problems that are holding white sprinters back? For a start, speed is overrated. It doesn't matter how fast white sprinters run relative to black sprinters. We need more whites in the final, and that's it. We need whites in the final to achieve diversity and fairness, regardless of their sprint speeds. We must address the current racial imbalance that exists. But why should there be a racial balance in the 100 metres? Whoever runs fastest makes it into the final. Isn't that equal opportunity? If there are no white men in the final, it's discrimination pure and simple. We don't want to see yet another Olympic final with an all-black lineup. This travesty has to end, and we need more white men in there to improve the event. We've now moved to a place where it's unacceptable to have the presence of whites absent from the 100 metres. Evidence shows a direct link between a faster event and more white involvement. What evidence? Damn, is that the time? Gotta rush. With all this focus on women, we need to wake up and smell the coffee. Feminism is about giving an unfair advantage to women in order to counter non-existent discrimination. That means it's favoritism, forever, and that therefore means it's about supremacy. What we're dealing with the idea of quotas for women on boards, or in computing or engineering, or any other area where women are not as numerous as men, is not an attempt for some sort of equality, it's an attempt for supremacism. It's the idea that women bring something special to these jobs, and that even though women are clearly choosing not to do these jobs in the same numbers as men, we still need to force a number of women into these jobs because they will redress the failures of men, they will empower women, and it will enable a better tomorrow. That's not about equality, that's not about being fair, that's about telling us that women are better than men. Having women in your company will improve your bottom line because they're women. Women should lean in and lead men. You will make more money in your business simply by having a woman on your board. The reality is that there's as much evidence that having more women on boards leads to better business performance as there is that having more white sprinters in 100 metres would lead to faster running times.
Feminists always claim, or have claimed for a great many years, that there's a positive relationship between increased women's representation on boards and corporate performance. And well, I've spent a lot of time in the last 3 years challenging various supporters of more women in the boardroom to provide this evidence. And whenever they point me to studies, those studies always show the same thing. They always show that there might be a correlation between more women on board and corporate performance, but they don't show causation. It would be a little bit like pointing out that very rich men tend to marry very beautiful young women. And it would be like claiming that those young women make those men rich. I mean, that's basically the line of argument they have, and it's utterly absurd. I think it's probably true that the best female executives are drawn to the most profitable companies because those companies can afford the best packages. But it's simply a modern echo of the traditional attraction that women feel for rich men and for wealth. There have in the last year or two been 2 independent studies published which show a relationship between increasing women on boards and corporate performance. One was a study conducted by Ken Ahern and Amy Dietmar of the University of Michigan, and the other one was one prepared for a paper prepared for the Deutsche Bundesbank. And both studies showed a negative relationship between increasing women on boards and corporate performance. There is no evidence whatever that increasing women on boards will improve corporate performance.
Many people struggle with the idea that feminism is a cover for female supremacy. It's a bit like the velvet glove over a steel fist. People look at the dictionary definition of feminism and see the lovely word equality, but they don't see the heavy boot of female empowerment, at least not until they've been squashed by it. The dictionary definition of feminism is a work of fiction. Feminism is legitimately about equality for women in the same way that Tony Soprano is legitimately a waste management consultant. And just like other forms of organised crime, feminism is parasitic in nature, and it makes demands of men and the rest of society. We are required to do things for women rather than women doing things for themselves. For example, demanding a quota for women on boards when more suitably qualified men are more available than women. The demands are made anyway, and with the looming force of law behind it. Think of it like a criminal shakedown. The mafia goes into a business, which they've had no part in building, and demand money or else. Female supremacist groups go into successful businesses, which they've had no part in building, and demand seats on the board for women, or else. Twitter is a case in point. It's a company that was conceived by men and built by men. The development work, all of the hard work to get it functioning was done by men. And then when the business is running and it's good and solid and profitable, then suddenly the demand goes out to have women on the board. Why? With the law and the media and government and every public mouthpiece on the bandwagon, the mafia could learn a thing or two from women supremacist groups. The Fawcett Society, which incidentally has the same initials as female supremacy, says that having more women on boards helps to avoid groupthink. But the acute irony is that the hindrance of bigoted groupthink is something that's only demonstrated by themselves.
Almost everything that feminists say, after you spend time analysing what they have to say, you soon realise that feminist theory, to use that expression, is nothing more than an expression of feminist fantasies, lies, delusions and myths.
Appearances can be deceptive, especially if you have imagined grievances, as women's groups demonstrably do. How things look and how things are two very different things. A certain few men no more achieve chief executive status and all the other positions on the board because they're men, any more than a certain few black sprinters achieve Olympic gold and all the other places in the final simply for being black. When we look at the Olympic finalists and ask ourselves the question, what do they all have in common? The answer might come back promptly, well, they're all black. When the answer should come back, well, they're all fast. These men were not selected for their national teams because they're black. These men didn't qualify for the final because they're black. Any white sprinter can join these black sprinters if they have what it takes. In the final analysis, the Olympic 100-metre final is not an all-black event. It's an all-fast event. Women and men take note. A recurring theme with men is that men are in lockstep with what women think, or with what any group claiming to speak for women say that women think, no matter how unsupportable, unmerited it is. We want more women in all these things because women say that they want women in all these things. Even if those women aren't there, even if they choose not to be there, even if they're not interested in being there, even if they're not qualified to be there, picking diversity over talent has to be a losing proposition.
Given that kind of equality of opportunity, it doesn't follow that you're going to get a completely identical equality of outcome. If it's the case that men are more competitive, they're more willing to sacrifice various other aspects of their life in order to get more money and status, and they're willing to take more risks, for example, take on more hazardous jobs and get paid more as a result. If that's the case, even if you have perfect equality of opportunity, you still wouldn't expect identity either in the kinds of jobs that men and women choose to do, or given that different jobs get paid different amounts, you wouldn't expect equality, complete identity in income either in terms of how much, how unpleasant the job is such that you get rewarded more, and how much energy you have to put into climbing the greasy pole. You can't use inequality of outcome as evidence that there's something wrong necessarily with the system.
Do we need a quota for white men in the Olympic 100-metre final because white men aren't there? No. Is there something wrong with the 100 metres because white men are not making it into the final? No. Will forcing white men into the final, by hook or by crook, improve the event? Will 100-metre times reduce? No. We don't need more women in computing or engineering or in the boardroom, any more than we need more white sprinters. Those women that can do it, good luck to them. Those white sprinters that can do it, good luck to them. But women's groups aren't suggesting that more women on boards means that more women will get to do the jobs that are more commonly done by men. What they're suggesting is that more women on boards will improve these jobs, simply because they're women. It's equivalent to thinking that more white men in 100 metres will improve world record times, simply because they're white. To think that more women will somehow improve these functions, simply for being women, is, to put it charitably, wishful, but it's more accurately described for what it is: supremacist. It's nonsense in its purest form, yet it seems irresistible to our national governments and to the European Union and to the United Nations, etc. And why is this nonsense so powerful? Well, that's easy. It's because there's nothing that men won't do to redress a grievance that women claim exists. Any grievance, real or imagined, from banknotes to boardrooms, forever. It seems that everyone's talking about the kidnapped girls in Nigeria, but why is no one talking about the murdered boys? Boko Haram, operating in Nigeria, are engaged in atrocities against boys that are much, much worse than the plight of these internationally famous kidnapped schoolgirls. Yet if you watch the news, or read it in print or online, or if you pay attention to the tweets of Mrs. Obama, you might have no idea of the nature and scale of these atrocities against boys. The fact that the killings and torture and beatings and mutilation and burning alive and throat cutting has been committed near exclusively against boys in Nigeria is almost entirely hidden from media news reporting, and no government official wishes to point it out either. So I'll point it out instead. In July 2013, 42 boys and men were killed in their boarding school. I believe the exact number of boys killed was 30, but it's not easy to be certain because our media is simply not interested in the details of death when only males are the victims. The boys and men were gathered into a small area, and then explosives were thrown at them, or they were shot to death, or else they were burned alive. As per usual in these atrocities, no females came to harm at all, and also as usual, the media failed to point this out. In February 2014, 59 boys were killed at their school. The teenage boys were shot or blown up while they slept in their dormitories. No girls at the school were harmed. Instead they were freed and told to go home by the attackers. We're often told it's hard to be a girl in Africa, but really, I wonder how many schoolgirls would change places with a schoolboy in Nigeria right now. Again in 2014, 105 men and 1 woman were killed in a village, with Boko Haram blamed for the atrocity. The stories of these 105 men were left entirely untold, and the only victim to receive any particular mention from the BBC was a single female. There are many more examples of how boys and men bear the brunt of atrocity in Nigeria. The examples are there to be seen, despite the awesome media silence on the issue. The fact is that when villages are attacked, it's the men and boys who are killed, and it's the women who live to tell the tale. So where is the human interest story about how dangerous it is to be a man or a boy in certain Nigerian villages right now? Or the far greater risks of being a schoolboy compared to being a schoolgirl? Where is the story of how dangerous it's always been to be male in times of conflict, anywhere in the world, and at any time in human history? Where is the demand for action from UN men or UN boys? Well, of course, there isn't any demand for action to protect our boys, because there is no UN men or UN boys. There is only UN women. It's clear that only girls are deemed worthy of such a mission. But tell that to the parents of the hundreds of boys, and only boys, burned alive or shot dead at these schools. Tell them that we're not interested in these boys' deaths. Tell them that we're not interested in protecting our boys. I await the UN to raise concern for the plight of men and boys in Nigeria and everywhere else. I await a new tweet from the First Lady. Maybe, raise our boys from the dead. Or, stop the killing of our boys. Or, we do care about the death of boys. Honest. There is a devastating information war on men and boys, an onslaught on men and boys, hiding every aspect of their life experiences, up to and including their deaths. So it is up to us to speak for the dead. Using our pens, our keyboards and our voices, it's up to us to speak for these dead boys and men, whom nobody else wants to discuss. The media is silent. The UN is silent. Even the talkative Mrs. Obama is silent. It's as if these boys and men never lived. Yet when girls are kidnapped, our girls, well then suddenly Mrs. Obama feels compelled to step in, and the world steps in behind her. We send surveillance planes and maybe even special forces. Our girls deserve nothing less. But the rampant ongoing slaughter of our boys didn't rate a mention from the First Lady. The murder of men didn't rate spy planes. And the murder of boys and men did not rate the intervention of the SAS. For kidnapped girls, we hold the front page. We send our hopes and our prayers. And we send our military assistance. For murdered boys, we don't even bother to send coffins. So is there such a thing as a female paedophile?
Oh yes. Now, female pedophiles, There's a great deal of controversy about this. In fact, when I brought up the issue that women could sexually abuse children, I was vilified. I was cast out of the sisterhood. I was no longer a good feminist because sexual abuse had to be under the guise of male power. And if I had a significant number of women who were sexually abusing children and I knew about these women, then that messed up the male power thing. And surely if women were going to abuse children, then they had to be doing it under the thumb of a man. A man had to be telling them to do it.
Do women tend to only commit child abuse if there's a man involved as well?
No, no. In over 75% of the cases, the women acted completely alone. Most times there wasn't even a man in the premises. So, you know, the excuse, and it's interesting about us as women because we're quite willing to accept that we are a superior breed and that we do everything right, but quite unwilling to accept that we could do anything quite as horrible as this. So it's, you know, it's really not us. We had a conference about this eventually in, I think, 94, maybe earlier. 400 people applied to come to this conference. It was a huge conference. But 30 people, between 20 and 30 people came, dotted themselves in the audience, and tried to disrupt it. They were yelling that, you know, this, why was I paying attention to women? It wasn't women. I was taking the attention away from men. One of the women who was going to talk about her own abuse, who was now helping others, then couldn't face the audience. So you had this uproar. You had people in the audience turning on these women who were standing up saying, sit down, we want to hear about this. And you had them shouting, and it was absolutely strange. And very sad, because it was like, don't tell me this information, even if it's true, because I don't want to hear it. And if those women who came along to our conference had had anything to do about it, nobody else would have ever talked about it. It would have just gone away. They've been able to disguise their abuse, I think, more cleverly than men have. And society doesn't want to believe that there are female abusers. It's easier to think it's a nasty man.
One argument against even the idea of female paedophiles is that women don't have penises, and so can't really do anything too serious.
Women tend to use objects, broom handles, bottles. One woman said that she was sexually abused by rose stems with the thorns still on, being stuck up. Women can be quite cruel using objects, but they're still after their own sexual gratification. So it's kind of, you know, it's just actually, it's just a physiological thing, the difference.
Sexual abuse by women has the same foundation as that committed by men. They've generally experienced childhood abuse themselves. Women are not immune from turning into abusers, as we like to think. By pretending that female paedophiles don't exist, we have little protection from them.
Yeah, women who sexually abuse children like to have jobs where they're around children. Nursing, teaching, daycare, things like that. You really don't think twice. I mean, most parents don't think twice about leaving their children in care of a woman. They do now think twice about leaving their child in care of a man. Again, I think that that's wrong. But there you are. That's what's happening. So they will find jobs where they can get in contact. It's like an alcoholic in a bar. Yeah, if you can possibly, if you've got an addiction, and this is an addiction, then you will go to some place that you can actually practice your addiction. And any place around kids is a good place.
Well, I have the pleasure and the honour today of interviewing Rowland Adelagun for the end of his video for the 2020 International Conference on Men's Issues. He is, it's not exaggeration to say, a legend in the men's rights movement. And I explained earlier on in the video that he had a major fall in 2015, which has affected him in a number of ways. But it's great still to be in touch with you, Roland. And I want you're still blogging, of course. I wonder if you could say just a few words about that blogging, what you get out of it, and the people who contact you?
Well, I do want to communicate with the world, and I'm doing my best to do that. I've had a memory condition, so it is rather difficult to be useful, but I do hope that I can say something worthwhile.
Okay, and you have, I think, 700 roughly subscribers, and you're posting, I think, around 20 YouTube videos a day, which is probably a world record right now. But I catch most of them and enjoy them, so thank you very much. And yeah, thank you, Roland, for everything you did. You know, your work up to 2015 influenced the entire men's rights movement. I don't think we'd be where we are today without your work. So thank you so much.
It's great to know. Thank you very much.
Okay.